Erica, it's so nice to have you back on the show again. And as usual, you've been coming up with new ideas for all of us, especially for quilters.
Yes, I have. Thank you for having me back. I appreciate it. About 2 years ago, I started coloring because that's been very popular. A lot of people will color with the color crayons. But once I did the color pencils, I fell in love because you can shade so much better with them, and I just love it. So, you know, the people who have seen me give a presentation, they know that I started out, I was in the mortgage industry, and when the market crashed, I needed to get some extra income. So I thought, okay, I'm going to give this a try. So I sat down, and in a week and a half, I drew up a pattern, I stitched it, I packaged it up, took it to one of my favorite quilt shops, and she bought it. And so that's when I'm like, oh, okay, let's do this.
I can do this.
And so 10 years ago, this is the very first quilt I made, and it's called the Gingerbread Man.
Of course.
And it's just a back stitch, very simple, very basic, very plain. Now that I started the coloring process, I've been looking at this thinking, oh my gosh, I need to color this because it would be so cute. And so I did.
Let's look.
And this is what it looks like.
The same pattern.
So you can see how much difference that coloring technique just makes it pop. And so I do a lot of workshops and classes with the coloring technique. What I like to do is show them also to think outside of the box, that they can take any kind of little design, and like this guy is my favorite block. And he would be so cute on just like a little apron or a tea towel or whatever. I wanted to also show you the two quilts that I have that are colored. This one is the County Fair, and this is Seasons on the Farm. This is done on white colored fabric, and this is on cream colored fabric, so that you can see the different effects that the coloring technique gives it. Yep, or this looks a little bit more antique-ish looking. So it's just fun. So I just kind of wanted to go over the technique that I do.
Let's talk about what types of pencils. Is it kind of the matte pencils we all used to use in school?
You know, basically any colored pencil is going to work.
Oh, okay.
So what I like to do is I like to start with a generic pencil. And when you start coloring, you're a child again. You stay inside the lines and you start out light. And I have a heavy hand, so I have to really watch that. But I always do at least 2 coats of the same color. And so I started coloring this, last night. And just to kind of talk about, a lot of people that are coloring, whether they're doing the colored pencil or colored crayon, they want to put a stabilizer behind the fabric, and so that you can color on it. Well, I don't really care for it that way because I want my fabric to move around and breathe. So what I do is I just take a piece of paper and slip it underneath it. Okay. And then I always have a second piece of paper, so if I'm coloring and I want to go back, you always got to pay attention to where your wrist is, because once you smear it, it won't come off.
Okay.
So that's just a little tip.
Think ahead.
So I started coloring this last night, and the way I do it is, if you get I left some room in the tree here. I like to do just little circles, and then just kind of fill it in. And because if you start doing streaks, like
we used to color
it'll
with thick
show.
colors.
And this just, to me, looks a little more realistic. And then after I do the whole thing, and then I'll go back over it again. And then after you're done with the base of the picture, you want to go in and shade it. Now, shading to me is the best because it brings your picture to life. And so really, whenever I'm working on it, I love to shade with Prismacolor and Derwent because they're oil ink-based pencils, and they go on so smooth. It is different. That's just a regular colored pencil.
Okay.
And
this is oil ink-based.
Correct.
Okay.
And they go on so smooth, and they are just a really nice pencil. But just for the sake of saving time, you can also just use the same colored pencils, just use a darker.
Oh, sure.
So let's see, I'm just going to kind of shade up in here a little bit. So a lot of people have issues with shading because they don't know where to shade.
I was going to ask about that.
Right, and so the way I look at it is you just want to look at if the sun was hitting it in a certain direction, what would be covered under the shade. So like where the snow caps are, we're just going to put just a little dark line underneath it. And when I do use these pencils, or actually even the Prismacolor or Derwent to shade with, what I like to do is get the same color pencil that I had started with and then go over it again and kind of blend it.
Oh, blend it.
And to where it looks a little more realistic.
Oh, yeah.
See there?
It really does make it stand out more.
Right. And so then once all of your coloring is done and you're satisfied with the outcome of it, you want to seal it. So when you are coloring with a colored crayon, the technique is that you want to use a dry iron and a paper towel. I use paper towel. A lot of people use wax paper or whatever. Paper towel is just fine. You put a paper towel on it and then a dry iron, and then you lift up the paper towel. If there's any residue, get a new one, and then you just keep doing it until there's no residue.
And the dry iron, that's important.
It is, and you want it nice and hot so that that wax will melt into it. So with a colored pencil, they say you don't have to do that step. But I do just for good measure because it's a lot of work. But the trick is with colored pencil is a fabric medium.
Oh,
I love this. So basically all I do, I'm just going to put a little bit in my, and it, whoops.
that's real thin.
It does, and it just takes a little bit. And then I just get a small brush, but watch what it does. There's some water. I'm just going to put, and you do want to have a piece of paper underneath this when you're working on it.
Sure.
But watch how this just brings it to life. I might got a little too much on there. You don't want it too thin or too thick, and you'll find your right medium. But see how that just like pops compared to the rest of it?
Oh, yeah.
And it kind of blends it
But
together.
you do go over the whole thing.
I go
like
over
you'll go
everything
over the brown.
that you color. You want to go over because what it does is it sets your color, it makes your color pop, and it blends your colors together as you're putting it
Even
on.
better.
And
I
then
think
you let it
that's-
dry.
And that's why these blocks, I think most people would look at this and think you'd done applique.
Yes, they do.
And this is so much faster for one thing.
And it's fun.
And yes, and you control the colors. You can have a different color gingerbread cookie if you wanted
Right.
to.
And with this one here, when I was coloring this, I totally visioned a little child at Christmas time coloring this because to me that looks like a Christmas
Wouldn't that be
coloring
fun?
book.
It does.
Now, I just want to say, after you put the fabric medium on it, after I finish one area, I always want to make sure to lift this up because that is going to go through the fabric.
I see that.
And you don't want it to stick on there. So just keep lifting it up, and it's okay to put it back down on there. It's not going to ruin anything.
So with that top paper, though, you will try to do everything that's above and then keep moving your
Yeah,
paper down.
Work my way down.
Okay.
Yep. And that's
Now,
it.
what about the
And
little,
this is the outcome
that's the
of what he
finished.
looks like. Yep. There he is.
Oh, how
Isn't he
adorable.
cute?
It really is. And the shading effect, and I
Yeah.
think you're right. Of course, I love to color. I've always loved coloring books.
Right.
But this just really opens up the options. If people say, oh, quilting takes too long, I don't have time to do that or whatever, making the blocks would be such fun.
Well, and I do a lot of hand embroidery, and a lot of people do not like the satin stitch, where I
Oh,
love it.
I do too.
And so they would rather color it in now that this technique is available to them.
Well, that's nice
So that's
to
a
know.
good option.
Well, thank you for showing us how easy this is to do and kind of inspiring us to think outside the box,
You're
so to
very
speak.
welcome.